The biggest mistake most people make is believing that a small vegetable garden is always going to look plain and feel like hard work. They spend all summer carrying watering cans, pulling weeds every few days, and watching their plants struggle under the hot sun while thinking that only people with big budgets can have a garden that feels beautiful and peaceful. I used to believe that too until I stopped trying to copy expensive gardens and started paying attention to the simple things older gardeners quietly did for years. If you stay with me today, I will show you how a few pieces of wood, some old branches, a handful of grass, and a couple of empty plastic bottles can completely change the way your garden looks and the way it grows. I am not talking about spending hundreds of dollars or buying fancy decorations from a garden center. I am talking about using what you probably already have around your home and turning a small vegetable patch into a place where you actually want to sit for a while instead of rushing to finish another chore. One lesson changed everything for me many years ago when an older neighbor looked at my garden and smiled before saying that vegetables grow better when the gardener enjoys being there. At first, I thought he was joking because tomatoes do not care if you have a nice entrance or a pretty corner with herbs. But after a few seasons, I realized he was right in a different way. When your garden feels welcoming, you notice small problems earlier. You water more carefully. You harvest at the right time. You spend an extra 10 minutes outside because it feels relaxing instead of exhausting. Those small moments slowly turn into bigger harvests without feeling like extra work. That is why I stopped chasing expensive solutions and started building simple wooden structures from leftover boards and fallen branches. Almost nobody talks about this anymore because people think decoration is only about appearance, but there is much more behind it. Some of these old ideas make the garden cooler during summer, help climbing plants grow better, and even reduce the amount of time you spend working. In a few minutes, I will show you the first simple change that completely transformed the entrance to my little garden, and it cost me almost nothing. When I finally understood that a garden should welcome me before it feeds me, everything began to change. The first thing I built was a simple wooden arch at the entrance using a few old boards that had been sitting behind my shed for years. Most people walk straight into their vegetable garden without thinking about how it feels, but that little arch changed the whole place. Every morning when I stepped through it, I felt like I was entering somewhere special instead of another place where work was waiting. A few months later, I planted climbing beans on one side and sweet peas on the other. By the middle of summer, the arch was covered with green leaves and flowers, and even on the hottest afternoons, there was a little patch of cool shade waiting for me. Not many people do this anymore because they think an arch belongs in an expensive garden, but an old gardener showed me this trick many years ago and told me that beauty costs very little when you build it yourself. Then I noticed another problem that almost everyone has. The edges of the vegetable beds looked messy and unfinished. Instead of buying decorative fencing, I collected flexible branches after trimming a few trees and wove them together into a low, rustic border. It took one afternoon and almost no money at all. That little fence did much more than make the beds look tidy. It reminded everyone where to walk, so fewer plants were stepped on, and it helped keep mulch where it belonged after heavy rain. Little details like this quietly make life easier. Near the kitchen door, I built a simple wooden stand from leftover pieces of timber and placed several pots of parsley, basil, thyme, and mint on it. Suddenly, I was picking fresh herbs every day without searching through the garden, and that corner became one of my favorite places to stop with a cup of coffee in the morning. Most people think these small projects are only decoration, but they slowly change the way you use your garden. You spend more time outside without realizing it, and when you spend more time outside, you notice dry soil, small weeds, or the first signs of pests before they become serious problems. There was one more forgotten idea that completely changed the feeling of my little garden, and it also helped my vegetables during the hottest weeks of summer. That simple trick surprised even me the first time I tried it. The next change was probably the most useful one I ever made because it solved two problems at the same time. During the hottest weeks of summer, the sun was beating down on my vegetables from morning until late afternoon, and even after a good watering, some of the leaves looked tired before the day was over. I remembered something an older man showed me years ago. He made a simple woven screen from long, flexible branches instead of buying expensive garden panels. At first, I thought it was only there for privacy, but he smiled and told me to come back in July. When I did, I understood exactly what he meant. That woven screen softened the strongest afternoon sun and slowed down the drying wind. The vegetables growing nearby stayed fresher much longer, and the whole corner of the garden became cooler to stand in. I built one myself using branches that most people would have burned or thrown away. It was not perfectly straight, and it certainly was not fancy, but it worked better than I expected. Many people overlook simple ideas like this because they think only expensive structures can improve a garden. But that old method has been helping gardeners for generations. A little later, I decided to build one more wooden structure that became my favorite place in the entire garden. It was a simple pergola made from rough wooden posts with climbing beans and cucumbers growing along the sides. By the middle of summer, the vines had covered most of the frame and created a natural green roof. Every evening, I found myself sitting there for a few quiet minutes before going back inside. My wife even started bringing her tea out there because it felt cooler than sitting on the porch. That small pergola did more than make the garden look beautiful. It attracted bees and other pollinators because of the flowers growing around it, and climbing plants stayed healthier with better air movement around the leaves. Very few people realize that simple wooden structures can help vegetables as much as they help people enjoy the space. Once my garden became a place where I wanted to spend time every day, I started noticing another problem that almost every gardener faces during summer. Even healthy plants began struggling when long periods of heat arrived, and I discovered that one forgotten watering method, using nothing more than old plastic bottles, made a bigger difference than any expensive irrigation system I had ever seen. For years, I believed that summer heat was simply something my vegetables had to survive. I carried heavy watering cans every evening and still watched tomato leaves curl, pepper plants stop growing, and cucumbers lose their fresh look before the week was over. The more I watered from above, the more I seemed to be working without getting better results. Then an old gardener showed me something so simple that I almost laughed the first time I saw it. He took an ordinary plastic bottle, made a few tiny holes near the bottom, and buried it beside each plant, with the neck sticking above the soil. Every few days, he filled the bottle with water and walked away. Instead of soaking the surface and losing half the moisture to the hot sun, the water slowly moved directly into the root zone where the plants actually needed it. I copied the idea in my own garden, and the difference was easy to see. The soil stayed moist much longer, and I was watering less often while my vegetables looked healthier even during long dry weeks. Almost nobody around me was using this method. Even though it cost almost nothing, that was only the beginning. Another forgotten habit changed the entire way I cared for my beds. Instead of leaving the soil bare, I covered it with fresh grass clippings, dry leaves, and a little straw whenever I had some available. Many people think mulch only makes the garden look neat, but they miss the real benefit. The sun no longer baked the soil all day, and moisture stayed where it belonged. I noticed far fewer weeds, and I spent much less time pulling them out because many seeds never had the chance to grow. One mistake that many people still make is watering in the middle of a hot afternoon when much of the water quickly disappears into the air before the roots can use it. I learned to water early in the morning while the soil was still cool and quiet. The plants had time to drink before the strongest sunshine arrived, and they handled the heat much better through the rest of the day. I thought these 3 small changes were already enough to solve my summer problems. But another old method using ordinary cardboard surprised me even more, because it reduced weeds and kept the ground cool with almost no effort at all. Dot. The cardboard trick sounded strange when I first heard about it because most people see an old box and think about throwing it away instead of taking it into the garden. An older neighbor told me to remove any tape and glossy paper, then lay flat pieces of cardboard directly on the soil before adding a layer of grass clippings or straw on top. I decided to try it on one bed where weeds always seemed to grow faster than my vegetables. By the middle of summer, I could hardly believe the difference. The weeds were almost gone because they could not reach the sunlight, and the soil underneath stayed cool and slightly damp even after several hot days. When I lifted one corner, the earth was soft instead of dry and hard. I spent far less time pulling weeds, and much less water was needed to keep the vegetables happy. Very few people use this old method anymore, even though it is almost free and takes only a few minutes to set up. There was one more lesson that made a huge difference during extreme heat. Many gardeners think plants need full sunshine from sunrise until sunset, but there comes a point when too much heat does more harm than good. During those very hot afternoons when the temperature climbed higher than usual, I stretched a piece of light-colored fabric over a few simple wooden stakes above my peppers and lettuce. It was not a permanent cover, and it did not block all the sunlight. It simply softened the strongest rays for a few hours. The plants immediately looked less stressed and they recovered much faster in the evening. Most people make the mistake of covering plants too tightly or using heavy material that traps hot air underneath. The old gardener who showed me this method explained that the goal is gentle shade with good airflow, not darkness. That simple advice stayed with me, and I have used it every summer since then. Looking around my little garden now, I no longer see a place that demands endless work. I see a quiet space built from simple ideas that have been helping gardeners for generations. The wooden arch welcomes me every morning. The woven fence and screens give the garden character. The pergola creates a peaceful corner to rest. The mulch cardboard and slow watering save hours of work every week. Still, there was one final lesson that tied everything together and completely changed the way I thought about a small garden. It had nothing to do with spending money and everything to do with changing the way I looked at the place itself. Looking back now, I realize that the biggest change did not happen in my vegetable beds. It happened in the way I felt every time I walked into the garden. Years ago, I used to see a long list of jobs waiting for me. There were weeds to pull, dry soil to water, and plants that always seemed to need something. I hurried through everything because I wanted to finish as quickly as possible. Today, it feels completely different. I still work in the garden, but the work is lighter because many small problems have already been prevented by those simple methods. The mulch keeps the soil moist. The cardboard holds back weeds before they appear. The bottle watering system quietly takes care of thirsty roots. The light shade protects tender vegetables during the hottest afternoons. Instead of fighting my garden every day, I feel like I am working together with it. That is something very few people talk about anymore. Many gardeners believe bigger harvests only come from expensive fertilizers, complicated irrigation systems, or costly garden decorations. My experience has shown me the opposite. Some of the best improvements I ever made came from materials that other people were ready to throw away. Old branches became beautiful fences and woven screens. Leftover boards became an arch and a pergola. Empty plastic bottles became slow watering systems. Cardboard boxes became weed barriers. Grass clippings and fallen leaves became mulch that protected the soil all summer long. None of these ideas required special skills or large amounts of money. They only required a little patience and the willingness to learn from older methods that have quietly stood the test of time. One thing I always tell friends who visit my garden is not to change everything in one weekend. Start with one simple project. Build a small arch or create one mulched bed. Try a single watering bottle beside your favorite tomato plant. Watch what happens over the next few weeks because real confidence grows when you see the results with your own eyes. Before long, you will notice that your garden is becoming a place where you enjoy spending your mornings and evenings, instead of a place that feels like another responsibility. That simple feeling is worth far more than any expensive decoration because when you truly enjoy being in your garden, you naturally take better care of every plant growing there. And there is one final thought that I always remember. Whenever someone tells me they have only a tiny piece of land to work with, it is probably the most important lesson I have learned. After all these years, if there is one thing I hope you remember after watching this, it is that a beautiful and productive garden has very little to do with money and almost everything to do with simple habits. I have learned that lesson slowly over many seasons, and I wish someone had told me much earlier. You do not need a large property or expensive landscaping to create a place that makes you smile every time you step outside. A simple wooden arch can welcome you every morning. A woven fence made from branches can give your beds a warm, natural look. A small herb stand can make everyday cooking easier. A pergola covered with climbing plants can become your favorite place to sit after a long day. None of those things have to cost very much, and each one makes the garden feel more alive. The same is true for growing vegetables. A plastic bottle buried beside a plant can save water. Grass clippings, leaves, and straw can protect the soil better than bare ground ever could. A layer of cardboard hidden under mulch can keep weeds under control for months. A piece of light fabric stretched above tender vegetables during the hottest afternoons can help them stay healthy when the summer sun becomes too strong. These are not new discoveries. They are old practical ideas that many gardeners quietly used long before expensive products filled garden stores. I still use them because they work and because they make gardening simpler instead of more complicated. If your garden is small, do not think of it as a limitation. Think of it as a place where every small improvement is easy to notice. Add one simple project this week and another next month. Before long, you will look around and realize that your little vegetable garden has become a peaceful place where you enjoy spending your time and where healthy vegetables grow almost naturally because the garden itself is working with you instead of against you. I truly believe that anyone can do this, no matter their age or experience. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope one of these simple ideas helps you enjoy your own garden a little more this season. And if you think these forgotten methods still have something to teach us, I have another story to share next time about one simple habit that quietly doubles the life of your soil while making every harvest stronger than the last.